I would say the most expensive weapon space is that of a submarines.
No, I'm all for developing what we are building in the Great Nicobar as a forward base, as a kind of Indian Pearl Harbor. That the construction of that base, both for use by the Air Force and the Navy, is going to prove to be a huge strategic deterrent. Even
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Double M Dialogues. I'm delighted to have as my guest again none other than Rear Admiral Raja Menon. He's, of course, well known to all of you. We did an episode just some time back, and that, of course, was focused on fort versus fleet.
yes,
So this one I thought we'll do on submarines. Sir, you're a submariner, and I'm sure submarines runs deep in your veins, and so it's a topic that's going to be you're going to be absolutely well versed on. So let me start, sir, by talking about creating a force structure. Sir.
yes,
When we decide on the force structure, submarine force structure for a nation, I mean, we can talk about India in a little more specificity, but for any nation, you have to look at a balance of many things. And one of the questions that comes up is that if you have the ability to also field SSNs, do you have to have an all SSN force, or do you continue with an all SSK conventional submarine force, or do you look at a mix between the two, sir? And if you're doing a mix, then what should the rough ratios be, sir, in terms of the numbers? By one school of thought, the gap between the SSN and the SSK has narrowed with time, sir. Particularly with the ingress and with the now I would say mainstreaming of air independent propulsions. And as these plants have matured, at least in terms of submergence, you find that even a conventional submarine can remain submerged for prolonged durations. You may not have the speed, you may not have the ability to do this on a sustained basis for months together as an SSN can do, but at least in combat, if you're looking at that 15-day or 20-day endurance, you have that submerged endurance, you have that with you. The other issue is regarding weapons, and when we look at weapons, we see that the other difference that is happening is, I would say, two things. One is that your weapon ranges are going up, particularly in the case of missiles, where you're going out to 1,000 kilometers or 2,000 kilometers. And the second is the issue, of course, regarding networking and domain awareness. And if you have strong domain awareness, and if I know where you are at distant locations, then the old concept of shifting a conventional submarine to a location where you're likely to find a target and a target-rich area, like outside a port or maybe outside straits, that sort of requirement diminishes because you can be on patrol mid-ocean. Someone gives you target data of a contact or of a target which is maybe around 1,500 kilometers or 1,000 miles away from you, and you can pop off a missile and like any other like a platform, and you can target it. So in that context, sir, where do you see we should be headed, sir, on this critical issue?
Quite frankly, Monty, I think most of us who were looking at the long-term strategic planning of India had, I must admit, I did, to a certain extent, discount Pakistan in recent months as a long-term threat.
Right.
That needs correction. So, as far as deployment of submarines is concerned, this is largely a geographical question. I think in the long term, our primary focus has still got to remain on China. And that this is not to say that we can ignore Pakistan, because Pakistan has now showed itself to be a recipient of world-class technology,
Right.
and therefore can prove itself to be quite a nuisance. So, as far as submarine deployment is concerned, the requirement of submarine deployment against Pakistan and against China are totally different.
Absolutely, yes.
Uh, under combat conditions, it's true that AIP can prove to be equal to that to the same capability as an SSN.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it in a slightly larger context, and that is, ever since the advent of the land attack cruise missile in the 1990s, navies have begun not merely to look at defeating the enemy navy, but to attacking the enemy's homeland. And what has made that possible is the huge amount of transparency that satellites have brought in. Today, uh, you can classify countries into how many thousand targets does it generate. Iraq, for instance, generated something like, during Desert Storm, generated, I think, something like 3,000 targets or 12,000 aiming points. And the coalition forces actually attacked 12,000 aiming points and made Iraq blind, deaf, and dumb. That's the way warfare is going to go. So, and the political authority of a country has got to be influenced by what they see the enemy armed forces are capable of doing. So, as far as China is concerned, this is an enormous task that lies before the Indian armed forces. And what can the Indian armed forces do that can influence the decision makers, the political decision makers in Beijing? And come specifically to your question,
Yes.
what can Indian submariners do to influence the political decision making in Beijing? Are they, for instance, are they wary of a deep continental thrust from India? I don't mean to comment on the colleagues in olive green, but unfortunately, we have this hugely unfavorable geography of the Himalayas. So, can the Navy therefore take on the task of influencing the political authorities in Beijing? And from that point of view, I think the SSN has a huge role to play for two or three reasons. One is that it has a much larger weapon load. Even today, 12 cruise missiles is the normal outfit of an SSN. The other is that the area of deployment is quite far, and therefore an SSN is more suitable to be deployed in that connection. But at the same time, I quite agree that conventional submarine adequately equipped, adequately fitted out and armed can play a decisive role against our Western adversary.
So, sir, I mean, when you talk about SSN, use of SSNs, then distant operations. Now, the next question that comes, that when we define distant operations from a geographical perspective of India, Distant operations can be in the Indian Ocean when you go deep south, sir.
Yes. China has chosen to create a rocket force which is more conventionally tipped than nuclear tipped.
Yeah.
And there is no guarantee of that they will not use those missiles against us if there is a flare up on the border, for instance. So that would be a disastrous consequence for us. We must have some punitive capability against China. If this is to rest solely on the army, I think that would be strategically unwise because geography is against us. On the other hand, I'm not saying that geography is extremely favorable for us, but it's certainly unfavorable for China. So, if we can use the developments in modern technology, which makes a country totally transparent and therefore attackable from the sea, and combine that with SSNs, we might be the service or the arm of the service that can influence the political authorities in Beijing to be cautious. Sooner or later, the Navy will have to take the lead in getting its feet wet in the South China Sea or the East China Sea. The problems of the uncertainty during the precautionary phase, this is something that countries will have to live with. Hopefully, we are two nuclear-armed countries, and hopefully we don't come to a conflict at all.
Yes, that's we manage this relationship within
We
certain
managed
boundaries.
so far.
Yes.
But
So let me switch this argument on another track, sir. That the role of a submarine in an anti-ship version is understood by all. Sir.
Yes.
I mean, because either you use a torpedo or a missile if you want longer ranges, and therefore, I mean, that has been the historic mission also
That's
of
right.
submarines. Sir. The land attack role now,
Yes.
sir. So this is something new that we're seeing. Of course, not that new. The Tomahawk, etc., has been around for quite some time. But when it comes to contiguous foes,
Yes.
like we have, so in both
Yes.
cases, they're not foes, but contiguous challenges, let's call
Yes.
them, yes. Sir. In which case, the land attack vectors
Yes.
can also be generated from land, in
Yes.
a sense. I mean,
Yes.
if you've got a 2,000 kilometer weapon or 3,000 kilometer weapon, is it wise? I mean, I would say the most expensive weapon space is that of a submarines.
no question.
I mean, you can, aircraft also to some extent, but I would even place a premium on a submarine because
Yes.
of your ability to
Yes.
sustain. If you have 24 or 36 slots, each of those, the cost involved in each of those is
Absolutely.
phenomenal, sir.
Yes.
How best should those slots be sort of used, sir? Is it better to use them primarily for the anti-ship role, sir? Or you think that and hive off the land attack role to land-based and air-based vectors, which are, because as it is, you're contiguous. And you mentioned the friction point of the Himalayas, but that applies more for an armored thrust or an infantry thrust. For a missile attack, actually, it's not that applicable
Yeah.
in terms of the friction
Yes.
of the land.
Yes.
So that is, yeah. So, what would be your views on this?
See, I'll tell you what my views are on that. The development of the land attack cruise missile has occurred simultaneously with the development of missiles per se.
Yes.
As you quite rightly say, they can also be launched from ashore. But serving in professional armed forces, our primary duty lies in protecting the people of our own country.
Right.
And if there is a choice, we should never fight in our own territory. So, setting up a capability on our home territory is definitely going to invite retribution. And with that retribution is going to come collateral damage. So, rather than do that, if we can take the firing platform to sea, I think we will be doing the country a greater service. But I agree with you that it's a more expensive method. But war is expensive. And if taking the platforms to sea is going to save our home territory from attack, I think it's worth it.
But sir, it may not apply in a sense that the retribution will be applied at a pressure point where, from an opposition standpoint,
Yes.
it does maximum sort of harm to you. So just because you're taking your launch platforms to sea,
Yes.
does not mean that the response will come only to the sea, but may even come on land.
Yes, it will also come on land.
So in
But
which
it will definitely come on land if you establish your forces on land. I mean, this is what we have seen in the Middle East. I mean, the newspapers are full of, for instance, to give you an analogy, that the Houthis have targeted a merchant ship in the Red Sea. But nobody writes about the fact that the people of Yemen are being blasted by hundreds of air attacks by the Israelis and the Americans, resulting in the casualties running into
enormous,
hundreds.
yes.
Hundreds. So I think using your homeland to attack someone is second best option. I think if avoidable, it should be avoided.
So the next question that comes into place, if you're going to do distant deployments, uh, then all these issues that we discussed earlier of timing, of sustenance, etc., come into play. And ideally, sir, you should have at least some port in
Yes.
the area you can put into, either to in case you get your timing wrong, or in case you have a problem that something has to be fixed.
Yes.
And therefore, otherwise you're on an extended
Yes.
leg,
Yes.
in which you puts your platform also
Yes.
to risk. So in that case, I mean, basing becomes a little critical, doesn't it,
Yes.
sir?
Yes.
And do you see any options really over there?
Yeah,
sir?
I definitely do.
Because all these nations
Yes.
in on that side of the straits
Yes.
are going to be extremely cautious
Yes.
in this
Yes.
about providing
Granting
a location.
bases and all that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no
Providing a
question.
location. Yes.
I visualized all this,
Yes.
and I'm all for developing what we are building in the Great Nicobar as a forward base, as a kind of Indian Pearl Harbor. That the construction of that base, both for use by the Air Force and the Navy, is going to prove to be a huge strategic deterrent, even if you don't actually use it for transit into the South China Sea. I know there was a lot of opposition from the ecology
Environmentalists. Yes, sir.
environmentalists, but I hope those are addressed. I certainly hope that they are addressed. But that's a huge asset, a strategic asset, which we as a country cannot afford to lose.
So, of course, one option is that you build your own bases. Of course, this is on our own territory. The other is that you look at collaborations amongst a different set of players. If the regional players are going to be sort of hesitant in this
Yes.
respect, there are other larger players who might be more willing to, like, if you look at the Australias and nations, or even you've got Guam, or
Yes,
you've got other
yes.
US territories over there, etc.
Yes.
So you think that is also an option, so that you can sort of start looking at in case you have to work out arrangements with these countries where you can.
I understand the Americans themselves are thinking along those lines.
Yeah.
And they are thinking of putting something in Tinian to increase the number of options they have, apart from Guam and the Philippines. So, if that is possible, nothing like it.
Yeah.
But I think Great Nicobar is a good first step.
And it's your own territory, so no one
It's our
can
own
stop.
territory.
Yes, it's no one.
It's our own territory.
So again, sir, coming back to the larger force mix ratios, what would you, I mean, if let's say, of course, we always have to be grounded in the resources that are available. And those resources, I would say, constraints come in on maybe 2 or 3 different silos. One is, of course, the funding. Second is your build capacities.
Yes.
Third is the technology that
Yes.
you can bring it. So you, for all these 3 will have to be addressed simultaneously if you want to build the numbers. But assuming that we can work out arrangements to address these sort of constraints, or looking at distant, maybe
Yes.
15, 20, 30 years downstream, what numbers are we looking at so largely?
I think we should start from the other end,
Right.
which is to say, what are the numbers, conventional numbers, that can act as conventional deterrents against a country? The Americans today have a vertical silo count of something like 8,800, roughly 9,000
Right. Tubes, that is, yeah.
tubes, vertical long silos.
Yes.
The Chinese
Distributed across the entire
distributed
force.
across the entire force.
Yes.
A country like Pakistan, for instance, offhand, I would say, probably generates something like 2,000 targets, the destruction of which
Right.
will paralyze the military capability of that country. China, of course, would be much larger,
Yes.
probably in the region of 30 or 40,000. But we have to think around those kind of numbers. And those numbers, I think, should not be fielded solely by submarines, preferably by submarines, but not solely by
Yes,
submarines.
you cannot actually read
Yes.
these sort of numbers.
In fact, today there are a fairly large number of naval analysts who are describing the power of a navy by the number of vertical launch silos that they can field.
Yes.
And I think the Indian Navy in the next 25 years should be looking at fielding not less than 4,000 silos, distributed between the surface component and the underwater component. Taking into account the fact that an SSN can carry something like 12 plus 4 tubes, 16, I think we should be looking at a number of not less than 24 SSNs in the next 25 years.
It's a pretty sizable number, so you're talking about.
Well, it's not so much if you look at the finance. Monty, the GDP of this country, I've gone into in some depth. The estimates vary from the lowest figure, which is from McKinsey's, which is 19 trillion in 2050, to a vast number given by a former analyst in the Economic Advisory Council
Right.
of 50 trillion.
Right.
Let's ignore that 50 trillion for a moment
Yes.
and take the lowest figure of 19 trillion,
Right.
say 20 trillion. We are looking at a naval budget of 80 billion
Right.
in 2050. So I'm not sure that money is going to be the problem. I think it is, dare we think along that scale? I think that is our challenge today.
What about the other constraints of technology and build capacity, sir? Shipyards, etc. You feel that will also be a constraint?
I think we've licked the technology problem.
Yes.
Of course, we are talking about, we haven't yet fielded a land attack cruise missile of the requisite quality, but we are talking about something which is very highly accurate, of the same accuracy as the Tomahawk, for instance. But there are posts in the social media which seem to indicate that we are capable of that already.
So the next, and I think the last issue, sir, I think we've covered a lot of ground, is that one is, of course, certainly if we set our sights on this target and you start building the capacities, by and by over the years in terms of your build capacity, etc. We are blessed, at least in the sense that we have, at least from a manpower constraint,
Yes.
etc.
Yes.
Maybe a couple of more shipyards will have to be created
Yes.
than what we have right now to sort of focus on
Yes.
these aspects, but that can possibly happen. The risk I want to talk about is of some new technology that makes transport oceans much more transparent than
Yes.
what they are today.
Yes.
And you go down a certain path,
Yes.
in which you've expended a large amount of resources, and suddenly you find that your vulnerability factor goes up drastically.
That's
So,
right.
is this a valid risk, sir, you feel?
I haven't seen any such technology on the horizon. In fact, I must tell you, quite frankly, the first time I was in a submarine, pitted against the best that NATO could field, this was in the UK,
Yes.
in the Atlantic. I was completely astounded at the fact that the best fitted ASW ships of the UK, the USA, Canada, Germany, Australia went over an old World War II submarine that I was in
And couldn't pick you
and
up.
couldn't pick us up.
Yes.
And that moment of wonder has continued throughout my submarining career. And in some cases, it has led to overconfidence.
Yes. You think you can operate with impunity. So
Absolutely.
But yes, sir. But I mean, you keep hearing of squid-based and magnetometers and things like that. Where even not using acoustics now, using all different sort of fields that you're generating, etc.,
Yes.
which can. But I would tend to agree with you that I've been hearing of blue-green lasers, etc.,
Yes.
for the last 30 years. Sir.
That's right.
And there's not been any maturity of the program, which
Yes.
which is anywhere over here. So I think there is a lot of cushion, and you can always, as you roll out a program, that program is not written in stone. I mean, as things change, you can
Yes.
tweak it and
Yes.
see and
Yes.
see as to where it leads. So I think so. We've been at it for more than around 20-25 minutes. Is there anything else you'd like to add on this subject, sir, for our viewers?
No, but I think we should be. I'm not certain whether we are going to be constrained by our building capacity, but this business of threatening the enemy's homeland
Yes.
is something that has. I mean, I was recently in the Naval War College.
Yes.
And I put this idea across. But I think we have to speak with a coherent voice on this. I mean, the future of maritime, the future of maritime strategy lies along that line. Because you mentioned technology.
Yes.
One technology is here, and that is what Vice Admiral Owens in the US Navy called omniscience, the ability to see the entire enemy country.
Yes.
That, like God is omniscient.
Yes.
He can see everything. You can see the entire enemy country. He can see yours. You
Yes,
can
sir.
see his.
It's a game of chess, sir. You can see each other.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So that's already there.
Yes.
And there's no pretending that you can hide things.
Yes.
And if you can be seen, you can be attacked.
You can be targeted. That's right.
Yes.
Sir.
So that's the way strategy has got to go.
So it remains for me, sir, to thank you over this conversation.
Not at all, Monty. Always a pleasure.
Fascinating as always, and hopefully many such conversations in times to come.